Hey everybody, I'm Alan with Bricks and Blocks Gaming. In this video I'm going to be discussing out-of-game spells and powers for the games Frostgrave and Stargrave. I'll be looking at the pros and cons of using these abilities outside the usual turns of a game, and how many of these I recommend selecting for spellcasters and for ship commanders. So let's get to the bricks and blocks of these spells and powers. I'm a big fan of out-of-game abilities in Frostgrave and Stargrave. The main benefit these have is they're essentially bonus actions, as characters can use as many of them as they know, and still activate like normal during the game. Many of these abilities serve as ways to power up a team, by giving them stat bonuses, or free equipment, or free or stronger soldiers altogether. There's also a lot of them that help increase financial gains. Many of the out-of-game abilities are subtle, but some are quite powerful and can form the backbone of a main strategy. There are some downsides, however. You only have one chance for each leader to use each of the out-of-game abilities they know, and no empowerment or exertion is allowed to boost the role. So it is usually better to think of these as bonuses and not rely on them for major parts of a strategy. And it's also important to note that no experience points are earned from using these. Since there is only one chance to use these each game, leveling them up can be a tough decision compared to an in-game main strategy that might get used multiple times per game. Meaning leveling a different ability could yield more benefit over the course of a campaign. An important question is how many of these out-of-game spells and powers should be selected. And to answer that question, we need to look at how many different abilities actually get used during a game. Most games of Frostgrave and Stargrave I play end up lasting about 6 to 8 turns, which means the opportunity to use a lot of different abilities is limited. I think the idea of having a large repertoire of in-game choices is appealing, but as a campaign goes on, trying to improve multiple abilities can be a slow process. Especially in 2nd edition Frostgrave, which limits players to improving just one spell per game. And in this or Stargrave, it's usually best to pick 2 or 3 abilities to be the go-to options for a leader's main strategy. Though it is still useful to have some just-in-case abilities. Another thing to consider which can further limit the number of abilities used during a game is what else the leader will be doing on the battlefield. In Frostgrave, spellcasters should be casting spells pretty much every turn. Spells are very powerful in that game, and there's not a lot of other comparable options for them to be doing. In Stargrave though, creating a captain or first mate that's skilled at unlocking loot through conventional will rolls combined with dex and picks is a valid strategy. And there's ways to make them very potent sharpshooters as well. Both of these strategies can lead these commanders away from using their powers in favor of other things they can do better than any soldier they might hire. If you've watched my Frostgrave wizard build videos, you may have noticed that most of them have 3 out-of-game spells. And I think this is a good amount to start with, though 4 would probably be fine if the build allows 4 decent ones to be selected, while some builds really need a wide variety of in-game spells for what they're trying to do. But I wouldn't recommend taking less than 2 out-of-game spells, and I would lean toward 3. However, for that series, I'll be creating an out-of-game specialist with a wizard that loads up on these spells, and that video will be linked in the description once it's released. In Stargrave, the powers are a bit more subtle than some of the game-changing spells found in Frostgrave, and I usually don't end up using more than 2 or 3 different powers for each commander in my games of Stargrave. I think having 3 in-game powers is wise to give options, but if a commander is focused on things besides using powers, or if they've got 1 or 2 really good powers they can spam every turn, which is a good strategy, I think taking just 2 in-game powers can be sufficient, which means I'm perfectly fine if my first mate has 2 of their 4 starting powers as out-of-game powers. and my captain has 3 of their 5 starting powers as out-of-game powers. And something to remember as a campaign goes on, especially in Frostgrave where much of the experience gained is stuck going towards learning new spells, is that out-of-game spells are bonuses. Most grimoires of in-game spells you find are never worth learning, because the spellcasters will likely be spending their turns on the strategies they were originally created with. But with grimoires of out-of-game spells, if you have the extra experience points, which you usually will after a few games, you might as well learn these and see if you happen to successfully cast them, as there's no loss if you fail, and you just might end up getting some extra bonuses each game. I'm curious to know how many in-game and out-of-game abilities you like to start with in Frostgrave and Stargrave, so let me know in the comments below. And feel free to click like if you're enjoying this content. I'm Alan with Bricks and Blocks Gaming. Thanks for watching and play well.